Welcome to Tanya Outside In, chapter Cuff Base, and we are finishing off Achdus Hashem, at least for now. So, as a very quick recap, Perek Cuff, we explained that the relationship of speech to the one who's speaking is it's a kind of illusionary existence. It doesn't have any of its own existence. It's zero next to the one who speaks. Just like we know that from the unified self, the unified person, words arise, and endless words can arise. So every word in itself is kind of infinitely insignificant because it comes from many, many words. And then, but when you think about where it really comes from, it's just a kind of expression of that oneness of who you are. So in that oneness of who you are, there are no letters. Letters are I mean, really, in a sense, letters are the only thing that Hashem created. Letters are tzimtzum. That is that is creation. Letters are how Hashem does it all. Yeah, and that's the truth is that's how we do it all as well. Letters contain self. Not meaning they contain it like they hold it, they contain it as though they constrict it, so to speak. That's what letters are. So when we think about when I'm speaking, what's the relationship of my words to who I am? Now we realize that the actual words are completely irrelevant to who I am, like utterly nullified to who I am. And that's what the Rebbe said in Perek Kaf. And then he went on and explained that in that situation they're the same as they were, but they are the letters of Hashem still exist within him because there is no place other than him. Okay, so now we're explaining that he uses himself to cover himself, as in the Koyach Elokim is what he uses create um, to create the Tzimtzum on the Shem Hashem, and he is also Hashem, he is also Elokim. So that's the reason, by the way, that you can't be Yotzi if you put your hand on your head. Yeah, you're not Yotzi. You're not Yotzi a head covering. If you put your arm like this with your beged, yeah, then you're Yotzi. Because the halacha is you can't cover yourself with yourself. So Hashem is the tzimtzum. He's the koyach of tzimtzum. He's the koyach of tzimtzum, and he is what is being matzumtzam. Like we said in the LCD screen, you have electricity that is being matzam same electricity. It's the current of electricity being pushed through the diodes, the amount of electricity pushed through the diodes, that is affecting the amount of light shining through the diodes, which is all electricity. So it's really electricity covering electricity. And this now gives me the opportunity to say my joke. Okay. One kid was with his brother and they were in the car and his brother's couple flew off out the window. And the father told the big brother to put his hand on his younger brother's head to cover his head. And after 5 minutes, the big brother turns around to his dad and said, "Dad, am I my brother's keeper?" Oh, come on. Anyway. Okay, so Perek Kaf.
I was on mute. We were all
I thought
laughing.
you were going to say
What?
something. I thought you were going to say your line about the turtles.
What?
Turtles all the way down.
Oh, we said that last. We said that. We already said that. You weren't there. Yeah.
Uh,
That he says that. He talks about turtles. Oh yeah, yeah, but we added yeah, you're right. We added the
he says grasshopper. He says grasshopper.
just to remember, by the way, it's just a very important idea, just tangentially. This idea of the turtles. And then he says it's like Hashem's, in a sense, the Tzimtzum is like a turtle. Yeah, where he's covered himself with himself. But then we were mentioning the idea of in Hindu philosophy, whatever it is, the idea of turtles on turtles on turtles, and the world is suspended on the top of a turtle, or whatever it is. But a very important thing, and this is Lahavdil, um, in regards to Chazal, is you'll see that Chazal don't they're not masbir. They don't explain in Yanim. What they do is they give stories. They give mashalim, but they don't actually explain it. The hardly ever. And it's quite amazing because when you know the moshul, like I was trying to explain to people, we've said this many times, trying to give over what is Atzilus, yeah? So we can talk about how Atzilus is, the kalim are transparent and there's absolutely no sense of self there. And we can talk a lot about so what is it? Is it a creation or is it not a creation? And you can argue that out and you can discuss, etc. Yeah. But when you just know that the moshul is the light being emitted from the sun, that's Atzilus. In the moshul, Hashem is the sun, and the light is Atzilus. Yeah, now you don't need to. I could sit there and try and explain that to you. Well, that means that the light is emanating from the sun isn't creating the sun. And if I was to put a break between the light and the sun, then by definition, the light would stop, it would create shadow. And I could go on and on about all the different, but when you just take the moshul, yeah, the sun and the rays of the sun, you are, so to speak, mussing um, the reality of Atzilus on a very, very profound level. On a more profound level than if I was to sit there and try and write an essay and try and explain everything, because the moshul's perfect. The moshul's really perfect. That is the relationship between Hashem and Atzilus, is an emanation. And then we don't, how does that work? Then you have the moshul. So just remember the moshul is, it's not just that you need to unpack it and explain it. You have to remember that the moshul is more accurate than any hesbir that you can give to the moshul. Hesbir is always going to be lacking, whereas the moshul can, not always, but the moshul can be perfect. It's just enclosed in foreign clothes. You with me with that? You get the idea? There's an important idea to remember because Chazal talk always in Moshalim and in stories. They're constantly giving ideas over in stories. And Lahavdil, Jordan Peterson talks about this. How do you explain the 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 goodness of a man? When you want to talk about the heroic qualities or the goodness of a man, yeah, you could sit there and try and describe and explain, yeah, or you could just tell a story about him. This is how he acted in this situation. Now you could then write a whole essay on, well, that means he's like this and he's like that and he's got this kind of temperament and he's able to control himself in this way and that way, whatever, yeah. Or you could just say, well, in this case, he was like this. And you know it, you understand it. And I think that accounts a lot for how we understand our children. That and how mothers or how a simple person, a simple parent can understand their children on a very deep level. They can't articulate it because they've just seen the child behaving. They just know without the ability to articulate it. That's a very specific skill, the ability to articulate things. Yeah, but you can really you know your child, even though you can't articulate it, you just know that this is who they are. And then a lot of the times you feel very clumsy when you do try to articulate it. So that was just a side point, but a very important point. Okay, Perek Kaf base. The Torah speaks in the Lashon of man. And the Torah, so in the previous parak we said, well, it's kind of like Dibor, but it's not in the way that our Dibor leaves us, whereas Hashem's Dibor stays within him. So then now the question is, why are you calling it Dibur? It's not Dibur, it's something else. Yeah, that's what the Rebbe is asking. So it's called Dibur Marsh. Why? Dibur shel Adam, like like the Dibur of a mensch. Why? Lefisha be'emes kachu. This is what Dibur is. He's going to now tell us what Dibur is. This is what Dibur is. Kachu. Derech you read this v'amshocha zachias letachtoinim v'tzimtzumim rabim. This is speech. A stepping down and a continuation of life force to a lower level, but tzimtzumim rabim atzumim, through many great and powerful tzimtzumim constrictions, minim b'minim shonim, from Esther, many different kinds, libroyas mehem bruim rabim, to create from them many different creations, minim b'minim shonim, all different kinds. וכל כך גבו ועצמם הצמצומים והסתפנים העליונים עד שיוכלו להסהבוס לברויס גם דברים טמאים וקליפוס בסטרה אחרא. That this stepping down process of the divine light can be so profound that the creatures that are created, Shama Blazer, that this step down process from the Rebbeinu Shalom, the Tzimtzum, can be so profound that the creatures created can be unaware of their life force, where it's coming from. For Gam Divine Tameim, for Klipas Sitra Achra, and that means that Divine Tameim, Klipas with Sitra Achra, which are all not aware of Hashem, so to speak, they receive their life force and their kiyum, their existence, Midavar Hashem, for Ruach Piv Yisbrach, from his speech, the Hestapanim, V'Yuridus Madregus. With Hestapanim, what's the difference between Hestapanim and Tzimtzum? Anyone remember?
Estepanim is in the Gavra, is in the perception, the filter.
Yeah, I don't know about the Gavra Hefta thing. That you could probably work that out, but that's not Pasha Pshat. Hester Panim is a filter, and Tzimtzum is a aperture. Tzimtzum is a din on the amount of light, and Hester Panim is a din on the quality of the light. So if you stop down the light, yeah, from your window outside, yeah, you've got those Israeli blinds that go, they really stop it down until you've just got a tiny crack. You will still know that it's daytime outside and it's sunlight. Whereas if you stop it down and then you put like a red filter over it, now it might not be the middle of the day. It could be already Shkia time. You don't know. So Hester Panim actually conceals the light. It changes the quality of the light, whereas Tzimtzum changes the amount of light. Which means if we had a world, a theoretical world, that was just with Tzimtzum, you could exist, but you would be utterly aware of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Which means you would have no free will. Free will comes from Klipa, which is Hester Panim. Klipa is Hester Panim. Yeah, and Tzimtzum is not Hester Panim, because Panim means you're concealing the inner the inner character of what this is. Tzimtzum, you're not concealing the Panim is how I recognize you. Yeah, that's why Paroi is Lashon Oref. It's from the back. That's acharayim, yeah. That when you don't recognize someone, everyone is not recognizable. People are recognizable from the front, from their face. Their face is what gives them that you can recognize them from their face. So Hester Panim means Hashem's concealing his face. Tzimtzum, he's not concealing his face. He's stopping down his light, which means you can actually see his face. And that's why you can't really exist, as in you could have like Chomer, you could be a physical being if the Tzimtzum was strong enough, but you would never lose your sense of oneness with God. You wouldn't be able to develop, you wouldn't have an ego, you wouldn't have any feeling of separation. Whereas Hester Panim makes Hashem unrecognizable. it conceals his face, so you don't recognize him, and therefore you are now have a sense of self. You can only have a sense of self when there's Hest upon him, because if you could recognize Hashem, then you wouldn't have any sense of self. You would realize you're just an element in the big picture. So Hest upon him means that's the revelation, so to speak, of of other, of the feeling, the sense of otherliness. Okay.
You don't like to think of it as you hear the Chesed Gavra that I said, that there's the Mitzad Hashem and Mitzad our perception of it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right there. I need to think about that more, but I never thought about that as that. But I'm sure you're right. I need to think about that. But that wasn't going to help us to understand that right now. But this is a very important point. Is we talk about the miracle of childbirth, yeah. But you know what's a much greater miracle, an infinitely greater miracle than the miracle of childbirth? In fact, the only miracle that there is.
I quote this in my Purim shir every year from you.
What?
That the biggest miracle is that the doctor or the midwife doesn't believe in Hashem.
Yeah. In fact, the only miracle in creation is that there can be a human being who could go, God, yeah, don't know. Yeah, probably not. That you could have a midwife in the room delivering a baby who is a staunch atheist. That is so the baby pops out, you should fall on your knees in front of this lady and go, wow. And she'd be, what about your baby? You're like, Peseda, but you're amazing. You're showing me now the koyach of my creator, that my creator can conceal himself in such a profound way that you're able to go, meh, God, Shmod, nah, don't know. Nah, probably not. That's amazing. That is absolutely wondrous. And that's what he says here. That is the lowest level of the lowest level of the Tzimtzum allows a human being to deny the fact that God exists. And that doesn't mean, by the way, I'm not going to say that. Okay, weiter. Ulechein, nikra Elohim acherim, mipnei shinikosim, b'chiyusam ein b'chinas panim. And therefore, these things, the Sitra Achra, Klipa, Tuma, is called Elohim Acherim. Why? Acherim is Lashon Acher, Achur from the back, which is the opposite of the Panim. Because their sustenance that they're drawing and their life force, it's not from the front of Hashem, yeah. It's on the back, which means that these people who aren't fitting into the plan of God, if they're not aligned with Hashem's agenda, then they become graphics in the machine. And Hashem doesn't want them for their own purpose. That's what it means that they're not receiving from his panim. Something you want for itself comes from the panim. And the two main tivers, you understand, the two main pleasures, which are achila and bia, are exclusively from the front.
And sleep.
The clay pair. That's not as profound. That's in the three pleasures. But when the two pleasures are achila and bia, yeah. And and that's always on the panim. From the backside, there is no pleasure. That's how it's meant to be. So that means that when Hashem is supplying these creatures from his backside, it means they're not something unto themselves. He has no purpose for them unto themselves. They are a means to an end. They are a means to an end. Yeah. When somebody's not aligned with Ratzon Hashem, they are by definition a means to an end. When somebody is aligned with Ratzon Hashem, they are by definition an end unto themselves. But it's funny because the person who is a means to an end, meaning his agenda is not aligned with Hashem, to himself he is an end unto himself. But the person who is an end to Hashem, in his mind, he's a means to an end. He's fitting into the system. That's what it means, an Eved Hashem. Like what's an Eved Hashem? What's an Eved? An Eved is a means to an end. I'm here to serve my master. Like I've said this a bunch of times. When Donald Trump was when they tried to kill him, you saw his Avadim jump on him. They were all prepared to give their life for him. Each one of them. They covered him as a human shield. That was their job. So ask them, who's more fundamental, you or Donald Trump? Who's Iker? Who's Toffel? Who fits into whose reality? Yeah, I don't see Donald Trump coming over to your house and making you, helping you out with anything. Yeah, that's what an Eved is. An Eved means that I see myself in context of the master. So you're a means to an end. But if you get that deeply into your kishkas, then that means you actually become an end unto yourself from Hashem's perspective. That's the irony. So a person who is aligned with his own agenda, he sees himself as an end unto himself. But from the perspective of reality now, he's just become a means to an end. Whereas the tzaddik, who sees himself as a means to an end, I'm here to serve the Bnei Sholem, from the perspective of reality, he's an end unto himself. That's a God joke. I like that one. That was much better than my joke. Okay, so they're getting now they're receiving from the Bechinas Acharayim the Kedusha, Perish Acharayim. What does Acharayim mean? K'adam hanoisen davar l'soinoi. When a man is giving something to someone he hates, which means he has to give it to him for some other reason, sheloi b'rut soinoi, it's not with rotzon. Shmashlichoi la'acher kaspoi. He kind of gives it behind the back. I once had that with a client of mine who proved himself to be a really nasty piece of work, and he eventually came to pick up his album, and I didn't want to look at him. I said, "Here, just take your album, just go, just please." I only did that once in my life. But I remember, like, when you need to give something to someone that you have to give it to them for whatever reason, but they themselves are hated. It's very hard to look at them. That's the imagery here. That's why it's Acharayim. He turns his face from him, from his sina to him. The fact that he hates him. And remember, hatred is relative. So when a man marries a woman for her money, that means that he hates her. Even though he might actually quite like her. She might be quite a nice lady and he might quite get on with her, etc. Loshen Tanya, he hates her. That's called hate. Because relative to the money, she's hated. And that relationship is doomed to fail. I suppose it depends how much money. I'm just joking. Kach l'mala b'chinas panim hu panimius arotzon elyon. Now he's explaining stuff that we've explained for many, many hours over the past years. Okay, he's just saying it here very, very quickly. Kach l'mala, this is the inyan l'mala, b'chinas panim. When we say, excuse me, panim, who panimius harotzon v'chefsei ha'emiti, asher chofetz hasem l'hashpia chius, excuse me, l'kol ha'korev elav mesitra de kedusha. This is him speaking out what we've said literally hundreds and hundreds of times. But panim means that he wants it for himself. Read the words here, because we know this very deeply. Just see how the Rebbe says it now. Kach l'mala. Bechinas panim, when we're talking about panim, who panimius harotzon elyon, it means the inner will. What's that? V'chefsei ha'emiti, the true chayfetz, asher chafetz Hashem lashpia chiyus l'kol ha'karev elav mesitra de kedusha. That he wants to be mashpia, and that comes from the side of kedusha. You realize how you can't learn anything from Tanya itself. And when you see that, when you realize what that means from what we've explained, now you know what it means, but when you actually read the words, once you know what it means and you read the words, it makes perfect sense. But to extrapolate from that meaning that there's ends and means to ends and things that are Tameh, he doesn't want for an actual end unto itself. He says that here, Bechinas Panim, who Panemius Arotzana Elyoin. That means it's the inner dimension of his will, V'chef Somiti, and his true desire. You wouldn't have hupped that I wouldn't have hupped that means ends and means to ends. Only once we've been masbirit. That's how the Tanya works the whole way through. The Tanya, to extract meaning from the Tanya, from my perspective, it seems to be almost impossible. But once you've got the meaning and you go back to the Tanya, then it's almost impossible to misunderstand it. Aval hasitra achra v'hatumahu he toivas Hashem asher sona. Klippa sitra achra is called an abomination to Hashem, and he hates it. V'eina mashpia lachiyas mepinimius harotzon v'chefse amiti. He's not mashpia to it life from his inner desire and from his true desire, asher chofez bo, that he genuinely desires, chas v'shalom, ki im command the shani basa kaspoi l'soinoi, shloi b'ret soinoi. It's rather like he's kind of giving it over the shoulder to the one that he hates, not Barotzon. And now this is just crazy how, when you understand this, but wait, by the way, what's the purpose, before we read this line, what's the purpose of Klippa and Sitra Achra? One purpose.
Free will.
Thank you. And by the way, Klippa is Gematria Bechira. So it's to give one thing, Ach V'Rak. The reason why there is Hester Panim is so that you can pierce through the veil and choose the Avodah Sholem. Because without Hester Panim, there would be no you to choose the Avodah Sholem. You wouldn't have any sense of individual self. So he created Hester Panim to give you a sense of self so that you can choose him. And listen to what the Rebbe says here. So just backtrack a few lines, just back a few words. Ki'im, command the shadi basa kaspoi lesoinoi. It's rather like the one who throws over his shoulder to the one that he hates. Shaloi b'ret soinoi, not for any will. Rak kadei la'ani shesa rashai v'niten zchar tov letzadikim. Only so as to give an oinesh to the Rashayim and to give a schar tov to the tzaddikim, the kafir, the sitra achra, who subdue the sitra achra. You see how concealed that is? You see what you guys get that? What I'm trying to give over here? This Tanya, this Sefer, they say that there were certain tzaddikim who said that the Kuta Moran should be bound from both sides, yeah, because it's just too halig for us to deal with. It's too easy to get confused by. Yeah, but I don't know about you, but for me, the Tanya, the actual words of the Tanya, once you know what it means, once you've been Makabel Masorah, yeah, then it's amazing. The Chazara, the power of the Chazara from this Sefer is amazing. But without knowing it, I don't think you'd get the wrong idea. You just get no idea. You just don't know what he's talking about. He just jumped for he was talking about Cheftzei MET. What does that mean, a true will? Without me having explained that you've got things that you want for themselves and then things that you have to do for, how would you get that from Cheftzei MET, a true will? And then to throw it at the end, so as to be manish the Rashoyim and to give schar tov to tzaddikim. Well, that's the whole purpose of Sitra Achra. This Sefer was written to be, and he says it in the beginning, this Sefer was written to be learned with a Rebbe. It has to be. It has to be learned with a Rebbe. It really does. Weiter. This is what we call Acharayim Derotzana Elyon Baruch, which is things that exist to give us free will, which is things that are not aligned with the Rabbeinu Shloim, things that have their own agenda. V'hine Rotzana Elyon Baruch Panim Hu. V'hine Ratzon ha'elyon b'chinas panim. When we're talking about the Hashem's Ratzon on the level of panim, hu makor hachayim Hamachaya es kol ha'olamas, that is the source of all life, that gives life to all the worlds, kol ha'olamas. Ulefi she'einu shoreh klal al hasitra achra, and he's not shoreh klal. He's not compatible with sitra achra by definition. Sitra achra is something that has its own agenda. Well, that means that you're not. That means that you're not linked in with Hashem's agenda, which means you're not linked in with reality, Bichlal. And even the aspect that he's giving to this creature, which is from his acharayim, doesn't actually penetrate the creature, so to speak, doesn't actually go inside. Yeah, it's not even his external will is not compatible with this creature, and it remains separate, so to speak. And therefore it is the source of death and tumah. Tumah and death is basically the same thing for all intents and purposes. For our intents and purposes. Meaning, why is Sitra Achra the Makor of all death? What is death? There's only one way, there's one very powerful way of describing death. Can someone describe death?
Disconnection between body and soul.
So what
that is the definition of death?
And entering into a true realizing reality, I mean understanding MS.
That's death or not death? That's life.
That would be death.
Oh, death of self, you mean? Death of a self.
Yeah.
Well, in the technical way, I always do this. Everyone says good things, and it's not what I was asking for to be said. So it's my fault. But death is, by definition, a lack of life. Just like darkness is a lack of light, death is a lack of life.
But the Maisa definition of life is connection of body and soul. That is a definition. That is the technical definition of life.
No, because the soul is alive.
So then life is connection of body to soul. When the neshama comes into the body.
No, well, that's no. Well, the
soul is the neshama on its own is alive, not in the physical world.
The neshama is alive, not in the physical world, but the neshama is alive, just like Hashem is alive. Elokim Chaim. But this is what Ramban has said. Beautiful. Just to add, this is a side point, but it's very beautiful. Is death, where in the absence of life is death. In the absence of light is dark. And in the absence of love is hate. Apathy is hate. There is no middle ground. Just like there's no madrigas of well, you can make it binary, I'm saying, but that's a nice way of seeing it. But death is like, Gabriel, you're talking about like the action of death, so to speak. The mechanics of death is the body is dead when the soul leaves the body, which means the body now doesn't have life. Yeah. So the
neshama is life. Definition of life is neshama.
Exactly. That's like life is life. Yeah. However you want to define that, if you want to call that God, that's really what God. That is really God.
Not exactly true though, because life is a phenomenon that exists in Olam Ha'asiyah. That's a unique phenomenon that takes place only in the world where body and soul come together. Amen. Angels aren't alive. Malachim aren't alive. Life is a physical phenomenon.
No, not at all.
So it's a certain degree semantics, but
yeah, but I mean, neshamas were alive. They have chayim, and like we
said, when they're not mechuber to guf, they have no kiyum in this world.
No kiyum. There's a difference between chiyas and kiyum. There's a
Is
big,
that true though? Does that fit with this?
just as a side, if you want to hear just the thought that I had just recently, Chai v'kayom, yeah? What's the inyan of Kiyam and Chias? Kiyam is existence. Yeah, you're either Kayam or you're not Kayam. There's no Madregas to Kiyam. Chias is Kula Madregas. Yeah, a rock is a little bit alive. A tree is more alive than that. An animal is more alive than that, and a human is more alive than that. Yeah, there's Madregas and Chias, but Kiyam there isn't. That's Kiyam and Chias could be transposed for the words Etzem and Shame. Yeah, Etzem, the essence of a person is always binary. Shame, the name is always Madregas. So Chai v'Kayom is when the shame and the Kiyam became one. That's B'yoyim Yeh Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad, where he and his name become one, meaning he is a Kiyam with his name become one. That's now this is amazing because the way we understand it is you have the screen and then you have the image on the screen. So Chias comes from Kiyum. Yeah? And it's amazing because what's the moshel in the goof for Chias?
The heart?
The blood. The blood, the heart pumping the blood. The heart is the blood. The blood is the heart. The blood is the Chias. And Etzem, the bone, that's Etzem. That's Kiyum. That's the essence. So when a person dies, yeah, there's just the bones left. But listen to this. Where does the blood come from? Where's the blood produced in the human body while the person's alive?
The liver?
No. The blood is produced in the marrow of the bones. The blood comes from the essence, from the inner aspect of the bones, which makes perfect sense in how reality is right now. Because reality is right now, there's Kiyum, and then life comes from Kiyum. So the blood comes from the bones, the dam comes from the etzem, the essence. But what's going to be in Asid Lavoi, in Techias Hamesim? Techias Hamesim means the shame is going to be Mechaya the etzem. The neshama is going to lift up the goof. And that's why when a person dies, they just end up as a bunch of bones. And Hashem is going to be Mechaya the bones. Like, in a sense, it's going to be backwards. Right now, the blood comes from the bones. But in Techias Hamesim, so to speak, the blood is going to be Mechaya the bones. That's the hischafkas of reality. That's Techias Hamesim. That's B'yom Yeshem Echad U'Shmo Echad. When there becomes Madregas within Kiyum. Because now the shame, which is creation, so to speak, has been mashpia back onto Kiyum, which was Etzem, which was what Hashem always was before. That's him in his binary sense. And that's the whole inyan of Techias Hamesim. That's the whole point of reality, that there ends up Madregas in Kiyum, and that's going to be forever because Kiyum doesn't exist in time. And that's David Melech is a Chai v'Kayom. The Chai is the Chiddush. He's Chai v'Kayom. Avadai he's Kayom. But the fact is that he's Chai v'Kayom, meaning that he was so gewaldig in his life that his shame was mashpia onto who he really was. And that's how we end up in Asid Lavoi. That's Techias Hamesim. That your life ends up being Mechaya your Kiyum, your essence, which is binary. And that's what you get left with. That's called Olam Haba, the final. That's what you end up as. That's forever because there is no, and that's Madregas.
How is it that your life is Mechaya the Etzem?
The what?
How is it that your life is Mechaya the Etzem?
In Asilava, that's what it means, B'chaya Mesim, because your etzem is like mace. Your etzem is like a mace. It's like a stone. It just is. That's Kiyum. Kiyum and Misa are actually comparable because it's the Chias that comes into the Kiyum that gives it life, so to speak. So the actual essence of the person is really like, what is your Kiyum? This is the best way of understanding it. How comes your Kayam? Your Kiyum is a lack of God. The reason why your Kayam is just like you scratch like we said many times, yeah, you take a rock, which is Meramas to Hashem, a clean, flat rock, and you scratch into it Gavriel. That's your Kiyum. So your Kiyum is a Chisaron in reality. That's called Misa. You with me? Now the Chias is Mimale Kwalmin. That's the Shechina Kadosha. That's the Rabbeinu Sholem, so to speak, coming in to the scratched out name and giving color, so to speak, to the name. It's like putting red color within the scratched out surface of the rock. The scratched out surface of the rock, all it is a chias. So it is a kiyum. That's how you are. You are kayam because Hashem pulled himself away. The amount of how much your kayam is commensurate with how much Hashem removed of himself. That's the tzimtzum, exactly. So really, what are you? You are just a chisaron in reality. You are a chisaron of emes. What's the chisaron of emes? Is take away the aleph. Take the emes is misa with the Rabbeinu Sholem in it. That's the aleph and mace. So take away the aleph, just end up with the charutz, the scratched out word. That's misa. So that's the kesher of kiyum to misa. It's just the chisaron. So then Hashem fills, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, Hashem made a hollow. He made you remember that thing, the beautiful quote where Hashem made a vacuum so that he could fill it. That's what we're talking about here. The vacuum is called the kiyum. That's the tzimtzum, and that's misa. And he fills that. That's chias. That's mamalekom, and that's shechina kadosha. That's the
opposite of Hester Panim.
That's the revelation. Exactly. That's the revelation of Hashem. So that's called Mechaya Mesim. We are working on Mechaya Mesim. Like that's what we're doing. Like we learn about Tchias Mesim going to be a wacky, Hollywood style film, thing going like that with all that, flesh coming on and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But our avoider in this world. Hi, Annie. Our avoider in this world is Mechaya Mesim, is bringing the Chias into the Kiyum. That's David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayom. And that we say by Kiddush Levana, because Kiddush Levana is the union of Chias. Kiyum is the sun, it just is. Chias is the moon, it is, it isn't, it is, it isn't, it is, it isn't. And that was David HaMelech. So the whole message of David HaMelech, the whole message of our Avodah is bringing Chias into the Kiyum. And that's called Chias HaMesim. And that's the whole purpose why we're here. Did you get a little bit maybe of that?
I mean, the Chias HaMesim takes place from the bone. The bone, you'll be reconstructed from the etzem, from the bone.
Yeah.
So I don't understand what you're saying. I understood everything. The Nimshal was amazing. The Mashal, I don't get.
No, exactly the point is the bones are going to come back to life. You see, you're saying that the Chias comes from the bone. No. The Chias comes from Hashem, and the bones are brought back to life. In how we are in this world, when the world's on its head backwards, the bones give rise to life. But when we've finished our work, we'll see that life gives rise to the bones. So the bones will rise again. Not that it's gonna come from the bone. That's how it is now. It's the life is going to come from the Boisham. Boisham is Machayim Mason. That's what it says in the beginning of Titus, no? That he gave 3 keys to. He kept on to 3 keys: the weather, childbirth, and Tchias Mason. That's the Chias going to be Machaya the Etzem, and that's what Rav Manis explains many times, is that the goof will raise up the neshama. Okay. Shkoich, I think we'll hold here. That was a good place to hold. Okay, we should be
You could say that without your whole lumdus.
What?
That I could, without your whole drush of etzim, that's really what it is that the guf gives birth to neshama. The etzim represents guf. That represents the most gashmi part of you, the most physical part of you. That is going to give life to the neshama. Techiyas hamesim. The body itself will give birth to neshama.
Yeah. No. I hear what you're saying. I went back on what I said with that last thing that I said. See, Ian, that only think about.
Shkoyach.
Shkoyach.
We finished the parak? Did we just finish?
We're more than halfway through. Okay, Shkoyach, Koltev.
Good to be back.
So this is after we learned. I came back to what Gavriel said about the body lifting up the neshama, the body being etzem, and the neshama being life. That's not correct. In this bechina, the body is an expression of the neshama. So it comes out that the body is actually shame. And in this relationship, remember, shame and etzem is always relative. So it's the same as Zoch and Nekeva. Yeah. So like, for example, the man in marriage, the man is Zocha and the wife is Nekeva. In relationship to the children, the wife, the mother is Zocha and the children are Nekeva. So it's always relative. But in the goof, in the neshama goof relationship, the neshama is Zocha and the goof is Nekeva, which is shame. And that is at the end of days that the goof will lift up the neshama is exactly the idea that the shame will lift up etzem, which is Moedek, Mamash Moedek. Okay, we should be Zocha B'Zrat Hashem very soon to see all of this, all of our hard work over these times of Gullus be revealed what we've actually done. Just keep that in mind that Tchias Mason is something that's going on all the time. That our avoider, we're not waiting for Mashiach, we're not waiting for Tchias Mason. We're involved in Mashiach and we're involved in Tchias Mason and we're involved in Olam Haba. And our avoider right now is everything. So let's double down and get selfless and get holy. B'Zrat Hashem. Okay, we should be Zoicha.